Yeah, it's quite something to follow a Brit on a day like this. I agree. It's it has stunned Europe, of course, the result of the referendum. We in Norway we had two referendums on whether we should join the European Union, and we said no twice. But in Norway it was no surprise, as you all know. In Britain it was a big surprise, and in all fairness, Britain is a little bit of a bigger economy than Norway. So we're looking forward to see how that. Hopefully will work out to the best for all of us, because this is actually it's a global issue. But enough said about that. When we last year adopted all these landmark decisions, climate, SDGs, financing for development, the big question was whether it would be business as usual or whether things would really change. And at the UN, in the corridors down Turtle Bay, it was also a question about whether we would really change our approach and see that this was not something that could be done by governments alone, but that real partnerships were needed. And I used as an example, when I tried sort of to mobilize my colleagues down there, that, if we really are to be successful here, we have to forget that this is about development assistance. That may be important, but it's not only about development assistance. Development assistance is approximately $130 billion a year. If we are to be successful in getting energy for all, today there are approximately 1 billion people without access to energy. If we are to be successful in that and to have renewable energies and more efficient energy, we need most probably investments of $600 to $700 billion annually, in addition to what we're doing today. And of course, if we are to mobilize that amount of money, we need partnerships with governments, we need with business, and we need obviously also to mobilize civil society. And this is a tall order, a tall agenda. So we need to move from billions to trillions to be able to succeed in this. And if we are to be successful, we need to focus on domestic resource mobilization. And how do we do that? We need to get investments, and we need to get taxes right. And then we know that there are certain places where this will be very difficult, in the least developed countries, in SIDS, where development assistance will play a much bigger role. And then, of course, there are particular challenges where development assistance, together in partnership with the private sector, will be able also to deliver, and I will be mentioning that in particular. One of the things I think that actually had an impact on the British election, and is also what we can see in the American debate going on now, is of course the big question about inequality. And inequality, I think, is deeply linked if we are to be successful in any of the goals that I've been mentioning, but I will get back to that a little bit later. You had David Navarro here, so he basically went through all the SDGs, so I don't have to sort of remind you about what that is all about. But let me just say that, for Norway, what's our starting position? Well, our starting point is that we as Norway we're 5 million people. We are the 23rd biggest economy in the world. That doesn't tell you much, but what it tells you is that what we're doing actually could have an impact also for others, and we believe we could lead by example. So that's sort of hopefully what we could also discuss here today. So what is important for us? Well, what is important for us is that we will be able to deliver on all the 17 goals, but some of them will be more important for us than for others. Energy for all, obviously not a big problem in Norway. We are 99% hydro-based, so that is not a big deal. But there are other issues where we also have a challenge. And then we also believe that we have some special, qualities that we need to develop further. And one of them has been our success, we believe, when it comes to development assistance. We believe that here we have developed, together with others, some very helpful partnerships that we believe, what we would call strategic partnerships, that we believe that others also could learn from. And let me just say a couple of words about some of those partnerships, and then I will move on into the national agenda. You know about the Every Woman, Every Child Health Initiative, I believe. That is something where we have been working together with the Gates Foundation, with the World Bank, with the UN, and with a few other governments. And our goal is, as you all know, to then prevent preventable deaths within 2030, and expanding equitable coverage of broad range of health services targeting the reproductive, maternal, newborn child, and adolescent populations. And we have to do this. We have developed then a new innovative financing mechanism called the Global Financing Facility. And this will unite resources from different countries, international donors, and from the private sector. And we do believe that this is sort of the way forward for different initiatives. We also be doing the same within the Vaccine Alliance, the so-called Gavi, where we have pledged US dollars 750 million over 5 years. And of course, also with Gavi, it's a question about building broad partnerships to get the governments, the vaccine industry, the private sector, and civil society. And we believe that if we are successful, we will reach 500 million children, and 300 million additional for the next few years, and that we can prevent 5 to 6 million lives from perishing during this period. And that is quite something. Let me also just mention a new initiative that we are working on together with partners, and that is a coalition for epidemic preparedness innovation, where we've been working very closely with the US National Academy of Medicine and with others, and that we are going, this is an initiative we're going to launch, of course, based on the experiences we had against the fight against Ebola, and we're going to launch that in Davos next year. 2 words about education. Education for us is a key priority. We know that approximately 99% of the investment in the education will come from national governments. But there is a critical element where the international community, donors and partners can come in and help. And here we have established then a partnership through the International Commission on Financing Global Education Opportunity, headed by the former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. And this has also been successful, but here education is not only about access, it's also about quality. And especially when it comes to quality and to stop hindering people from dropping out of education, it's a huge, huge challenge. Let me then go in to say a little bit more about the challenges that we are facing in Norway when it comes to implementing this. Of course, the implementation of the development agenda, excuse me, the development agenda that I mentioned is also a part of our obligation to implement the SDGs. So that's why I also want to highlight that. That's important to continue also with that. For us, we have decided that our Prime Minister, as she's the only Prime Minister that will be for the high-level political forum in July, where she will present sort of the Norwegian report to the UN family on how we are doing and what we are doing. You may not have noticed, so I will have to mention to you that we, in all the different indexes that you will find about development and economic and social development, Norway usually will rank very high on that, and also when it comes to the implementation of the SDGs. But at the same time, it's obvious that there are particular challenges, and that goes in particular when it comes to consumption patterns, the challenges of climate change. So, but in particular, and I think that goes for the whole developed world, when it comes to sustainable consumption and production, that is indeed a big, big issue. For us, health is also an issue, and that is, of course, in particular, non-communicable diseases, and it's a question about mental health, and that you will see in many developed societies. Education is also an issue, but for us, it is about, of course, not primary education, where we have 100% coverage, but it's about higher education, where we have a challenge when it comes to completion rates in post-compulsory education, and especially in upper secondary education. For us, it's a challenge that only 72% of our students are completing their studies after 5 years, compared to an OECD average of 87%. And we're trying to find out what are the reasons for this. Of course, we believe that a main reason for our success is that we've been able to keep a high employment rate, and that we have a rather high employment rate both for women and men. Actually, if the OECD average for women employment, if we had been at that level, we would have lost the average of what we're receiving from the oil and gas industry every year. So a higher employment of women, extremely important for our welfare. And we want to make sure that we can continue to keep that high level of employment. And that, of course, for us has been a challenge with what seemed to be the collapse of the oil and gas market, with the reduction of oil prices. But we have then managed to sort of basically to protect our economy, because, as you know, we did not spend our investments from oil and gas, our oil and gas income into our budgets, our economy, but we put it into a sovereign wealth fund. And I think now we are very lucky that our politicians managed to keep that through the years with a very high oil price. For Norway, it's, when I say that we also have a challenge with youth unemployment, it is true, but I should mention it's approximately at 7%. So, I mean, compared to many other places, it's not that high. But the average unemployment in Norway is at 3%. So for us, 7% is high, and it is a challenge, and we want to reduce it even further. And that is because we believe that, for youth in particular, to stay outside of the workforce, that is something that may influence you for the rest of your life, and you may drop out from the workforce for the rest of your life. Of course, this is, for the rest of Europe, even a bigger challenge, but it's something we also hope to be able to improve. Then we, on all different polls and indexes, you will see that we score very high on gender equality. But for us, it is also a big challenge when it comes to violence against women. And this is the fight against violence against women is for us a top priority. And of course, it's domestic violence, but it's also rape. And this is, what we see is that this is something that is so difficult to handle that we have not really been successful in reducing the numbers lately. So this needs a new effort. And we will do whatever we can. We will continue our efforts globally to continue to work on this, but we will also try to improve this through political, technical, and financial support back in Norway. And part of this is also the work that we are doing when it comes to combat abuse against children. This is for us also a top priority. It goes into areas that is difficult because it goes into the family, and we have had a rather strict policy that if there is, abuse of children, the government may take action and take children from the family. This is, and especially for immigrant families coming to Norway, this is a big challenge. And we are currently having a big debate on this and how we are going to communicate this in a better manner. But we have a program that we call A Good Childhood Lasts a Lifetime. And this is something we believe is extremely important to continue to have a good society. Then, two more things, and then I will end. Sustaining income growth of the bottom 40% of the population at a rate higher than the national average. What does it mean? Well, Norway is most probably one of the most equal countries in the world. We have relatively small differences. And that is for many reasons. But one of the reasons is that we have had a cooperation between the state, the private sector, and the trade unions. So if there are, big danger for big industrial actions, the state will usually appoint one person and say, could you sit down, try to negotiate, and see if we can find a solution on this? Is there anything that the government can do to facilitate it? It doesn't always work, but in many cases it works. So this has helped to develop a society where there is a big level of trust, understanding, and where it is also sort of accepted that to have a good society, you need to reduce inequalities. And this is something that we will continue to strive to be successful in. And we have, as you may know, we have free education. You don't pay for college. You have free medical services, obviously. And we also put a lot of, you get cash if you are unemployed, a lot of support for that as well. And this cash transfer, we believe, is extremely important to be able to get society running in a proper manner. Yes. Let me then say a little bit about how we work together with the cooperation between business, private sector, government, and civil society. We believe that all of these sectors need to cooperate to be successful in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And what we have seen lately is that there are initiatives being taken from business sector, from industry, from the investors. And of course, one key component for us is that we have the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world because of our oil and gas. And this fund, we also then are having discussions on how can this fund in its investments portfolio make sure that it invests actually in industries and businesses that has a sustainable development profile. So we made a decision just a few months back that we will withdraw from all investments in the coal industry, for instance. So this is an ongoing discussion that we're having because we want, as Norway, to send messages to the world that it can no longer be business as usual. I'm also very pleased to say that we have seen that there are independent initiatives from businesses in Norway where they understand that if they are to be successful, if their business is to be successful, they have to start to adopt to the new realities of the Sustainable Development Goals, and of course, in particular, to the challenge of climate change. And why is this happening in Norway? I think it's a combination of factors. One is that we are such a small community. It's easier to debate, to have a discussion. Civil society is strong. There is a lot of mobilization from private sector. And of course, we as consumers, we are increasingly seen as having power. And I see that business community has started to respond to this. But I think this is also an international phenomenon. We see, for instance, from BlackRock, that there are new messages being There we are. Okay. So one more minute. So what I want to end with is to say this, that so what we see, there are changes, but let's also be honest. The changes we are seeing is not big enough really to make an impact. We need to see bigger changes. Let me just take one example. India. If India are to be able to fight climate change and to fight poverty, it needs to get many things right. One of them is, of course, the energy consumption and to get more energy. 50% of India's energy is what we call dirty coal. If India were to follow the example of China, China had 70% of China's energy is based on coal, but the Indian coal is what we call more dirty. But if India is to follow China's lead, and to go down that road just to focusing on high economic growth and spending using the coal that is there for them to use, and which is the right to use, it will not only destroy India, but it will have a global impact. They may, in the short term, be able to fight poverty, but the consequences of climate change will be so dramatic. Why is this important? It's important because, for obviously, I mean, India per capita, the emissions is insignificant per capita. So we can't stop India from developing. We need India to develop. We need India to fight poverty. But we, as an international community, has a responsibility to go in and to see where can we make investments to help India to move in the right direction. These investments will not be coming from governments. It will be coming from development banks, from the World Bank, but it also will have to come from the private sector. So the private sector will have to see opportunities, but it's also important that there is sent messages from governments, from civil society, and from all the different development banks that are out there. And without this change, we are not going to be successful. Thank you.